Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Congressman Darren Soto. I'm joined by my Deputy Ledge Director, Bill Rockwood. You'll get there someday, though. And this is our Jobs Town Hall. I want to thank everybody for tuning in today. You know, we come from a very special region. Central Florida is such a growing region and so vibrant. And I want to start by talking about some of the main facts that would surprise a lot of folks in my introduction, which first of all, Orlando is the 22nd largest metro area in the country. So top 25 media market for those who are keeping track. But we grew more than any other top 25 metro area in the nation at over 20%, with over 1,500 people moving to Central Florida every week. So if it feels like it's crowded, well, you know you're right. It is. And I know Bill's going to be going over some questions with us throughout our town hall, and we're going to be taking some questions online as well.
Well, thank you, Darren. Some exciting things going on in the district that you framed up, but I'd like to start with some of the challenges that you see that the folks in Florida 9th District face.
Sure. Well, thanks for that great question, Bill. We know we have tremendous growth, so that's a positive as far as new businesses and construction and to a certain extent real estate. But we know there's also a lot of challenges to overcome. One of the things to understand is that Central Florida is 50th out of 50 in median wage at $15 per hour among the top 50 metro areas. So we know we have to raise wages. And I know this should come as no surprise to our constituents back home, which is why I'm really proud that one of the first bills that we're able to pass out over these last couple of months to really help the district has been to lift the minimum wage to $15 an hour. And we also passed a bill to require equal pay for equal work. Far too often women are paid pennies on the dollar to 80 to 90 cents on the dollar of what their male counterparts get to earn. And so when we're talking about the median income being $15 an hour, what that really means is that it'll lift those who are getting paid less than that, and it'll also lift wages across the board. And it really could result in people being lifted out of poverty. Now, one of the issues is right now, this bill's in the Senate, and it hasn't been voted on yet. So that'll be a big issue for the Senate to have to tackle so that we can finally lift thousands and thousands of families out of poverty in Central Florida.
Well, diving into some of the specifics of the economy down in Florida, two of the major drivers are tourism and agriculture. So I thought maybe you can elaborate on some of the efforts that we're doing to improve those industries in the area.
Sure. Well, as we know, tourism is the biggest industry in Central Florida. We have the best theme parks in the world. This is something that has made our region famous worldwide. I've been to visit our troops abroad around the world. I've gone to different congressional delegation trips, and what always makes me proud and always amazes me is that everyone knows Orlando everywhere I've been. So we really are an internationally famous city, and it has a lot to do with the great effort and capital put in to advertise and market our region and our wonderful tourism. So one of the biggest things is Orlando International Airport. At about $2.2 billion, creating a new terminal that's going to help not only with Central Floridians flying in and out of Central Florida with their wait times and their ability to be mobile, but also for the nearly 74 million tourists who visit Central Florida. And just to give you an idea, 100 million tourists visit all of Florida. So Miami's big, but when it comes to tourism, Orlando's the big giant of the state with 73% of tourists coming to our region. So having that new airport terminal is absolutely key. It also creates a lot of high-paying construction jobs. There may be folks watching right now who are working there or in some of the other major infrastructure packages that we have going on and being built in Central Florida. The other big issue that we're going to actually have a hearing on tomorrow is Brand USA, which helps market tourism destinations across the world, including Orlando. That's going to be an exciting bill that we'll have to reauthorize that program that we'll be doing along with Congressman Bill Arakis. It's a bipartisan bill to highlight the great work that's being done in the great tourism industry in the Orlando area. We're also working on protecting international travel and copyrights. When people ask why copyrights are so important to Central Florida, why intellectual property is so important, I remind them that I come from a land where a cartoon mouse and a fictional wizard are our two greatest assets. So you get how important it is to protect them when it comes to protecting copyrights. And one thing you notice when you travel abroad, I've been to places like Italy where you hear half the music on the radio is American music. We've had some of our staff go to China and talked about the amount of American movies being played there. The amount of copyrighted arts, movies, music that is exported from our country is staggering. And Disney and Universal are two of those multimedia companies who have theme parks but are also generating a lot of content. So it's absolutely critical that we protect that. And we'll have that hearing, as I said, tomorrow on the Brand USA. The other biggest industry is agriculture. And for a lot of folks in the north part of the district, this may seem like some surprise because when you look in the suburbs, it seems as far away as possible. But about half the district is agricultural and rural. When you get to large parts of Osceola County and Polk County, citrus and cattle are two very big industries, and obviously making it the second biggest industry not only in the district but in the state of Florida. So we've been doing a lot to help with the challenges that agriculture faces. One of the things that many of you may have read about is citrus greening, a disease that weakens the trees and ultimately has led to a reduction in citrus production. We were once at a peak of about 230 million boxes, and now we're down to about 71, but that's up from 38 million after Hurricane Irma, and still up from the year before, and we should hit 75 million boxes this year. So we're going back up. But one thing that I think people don't realize is it's beyond just the orange groves and picking the oranges. We have the juice processing plants in the district. So it's of great pride when I'm going into the caucus meeting and I see Simply Orange or I see Florida Natural being served at our breakfast meetings, because both those come right from, you guessed it, Florida's 9th congressional district. And we also have two Brazilian juice companies in the district too, Citricali and Citrasuca. These are some of the high-paying factory wages that we have in Central Florida in our district, is working at those juice plants. And in fact, the Simply Orange plant is the largest juicing plant in North America. Fun fact, right? Biggest one. It's almost 1 million square feet. A huge facility in Auburndale, Florida, employing thousands of people, all making decent wages. So when we're talking about protecting citrus, we're talking about the groves, we're talking about the trucking industry, we're talking about keeping America healthy with nutritious orange juice, but we're also talking about high-paying factory jobs in the district, all of which are critical to particularly folks in Polk County. Then, of course, not only do we have the largest citrus-producing county in the state in Polk, we have the largest cattle-producing county in the state in Osceola, which again, and I think a lot of folks in the suburbs where I live in Kissimmee and others may be surprised about that. We're home to the largest cattle herd in the nation. Who would have thought 20, 30 miles from Disney you'd have the largest cattle herd in the nation? And that is, of course, at Deseret Ranch. Deseret Ranch is 360,000 acres large. That ranch is the size of Seminole County. So you can imagine how big the Deseret Ranch is, among many other ranches, most of which are about 25,000 acres down to a few hundred acres. And we do mostly cow-calf operations. So the biggest thing that we had to do up here to help out citrus greening was $125 million for specialty crop research and for disaster relief because they got hit pretty hard by Hurricane Irma. And then for our cattle ranches, the biggest thing was a vaccine bank for livestock. We take for granted, I think, a lot of times that a lot of other areas of the world have major threats to their livestock. We've all heard about mad cow disease in Great Britain, but many of you may not know that there was almost a screwworm outbreak in the Florida Keys that was able to be stopped in its tracks based upon the technology we have in place to limit the spread of it through insects and also through vaccines. So we want to continue to have Florida's cattle industry continue to grow strong, and those again represent a lot of jobs beyond just the ranches in transportation and in industry in general. So those are a lot of the things that you may hear about on the day-to-day, the tourism and agriculture area. The other issue is that agriculture is affected by the trade negotiations for the USMCA. Currently, NAFTA is still in place. There are admittedly winners and losers in NAFTA. Agriculture did pretty well. High-tech manufacturing did very well. Low-tech manufacturing really took a hit. And then even some of the agriculture in Florida did well while others didn't do so well. So if you were very big, like citrus or cattle, you did very well because when you get to the economies of scale, you can compete on a global scale. And that's what we saw. But with certain other areas like other fruits and vegetables like strawberries, blueberries, and tomatoes, they still to this day count on a certain part of the season. There's a window between about late January to early April where we're pretty much the only blueberries and strawberries in the nation and tomatoes. But Mexico is now dumping a lot of their fruits and vegetables on the market. So the big issue for our district with USMCA is to make sure that our local growers of fruits and vegetables in Central Florida and in Florida can bring their own case of unfair trade practices, their own case of anti-dumping against Mexico, should that happen. So we've heard a lot of questions. I know my communications director, Clarissa, had mentioned about USMCA. So that's one of the areas that affects our district at USMCA. Another is light manufacturing and exports and imports of steel and aluminum, as well as, in general, citrus and cattle to Canada, where we sell a lot of that to Canada. So we expect to have a vote, hopefully before the end of the year. We are hammering out different areas with regard to labor and environment, and then, of course, working on protecting our local fruits and vegetable growers in Florida. The good news is NAFTA is at least still in place until we get a new agreement. While the disputes with China right now, there's no end in sight. President Trump has taken, obviously, an aggressive stance against China, but he has not had sort of a landing for all this. So that chaos is also hurting a lot of our citrus, cattle, and other exporters in the district. So it's important to keep in mind we have this USMCA issue with Canada and Mexico, but we also have this whole other fight with China that is really causing havoc on some of these industries. But I'm hopeful, as I said, that we'll get a vote before the end of the year. And I've gotten to speak with the consulates from Canada and Mexico and kept them abreast of our progress as well. One of the last industries that could be affected by USMCA, and one of the new industries we're bringing to Central Florida, is steel. When you think about how a lot of areas of the country are actually losing steel production, I'm proud to have worked with Nucor Steel to create the first new steel plant in the South in years. It's going to be in Frostproof, which is obviously a big citrus area in the southern part of our district in Polk County, but it's an area where we could use a lot more high-paying blue-collar jobs, jobs that you could get trained for, but you don't necessarily need a college degree or beyond. So we work with them on everything from navigating through the endangered species process to meeting with the board and with local officials. They have a big presence here in D.C., and that's going to be hundreds of new jobs in Frostproof, paying $15, $20 plus an hour in an area that frankly needs more higher paying jobs. And so we're honored to work with Frostproof and with Nucor to bring new manufacturing jobs to South Polk County. But I know there's other questions we're going to have on manufacturing as well.
Yeah, well, that's a perfect segue. Thank you for those updates on our tourism and agriculture industry. And as you just mentioned with construction, anyone that takes a daily commute on I-4 is familiar with some of the projects they see. But I was wondering if you could go into some more detail about the larger scale manufacturing and construction projects going on in the district.
Sure. In addition to manufacturing of steel that we're getting in now, we also have manufacturing of boats in the area and a lot of electronics. I'm going to go into a little more of that in the high-tech section that we're going to go over in a little bit. But yes, construction, and more construction. Let's start with the good news. Few regions of the country have $5 billion worth of federal projects going on right now. $5 billion. When you talk about the airport, and you combine that with the I-4 Ultimate project, we are blessed to have a huge stimulation of federal funds coming in to help our growing region. We talked a lot about the airport already and how important it is for the quality of life of Central Floridians and for tourism. But we know I-4 is both the bane of our existence in Central Florida and the great hope for the growth of our region. Let's start from where we started. In the 1960s, there was this idea to do a interstate highway from Daytona down to Tampa. And a bunch of folks asked, why do we need a six-lane highway to go near Orlando? There was such local opposition at first that they actually fought I-4 going through downtown. What a difference a half a century makes. Because now people are wondering why we only have a six-lane highway going through Orlando. Which is why we're building 4 new lanes that are going to be on I-4 that will have some toll aspect to it that will be based upon traffic and usage. Our region desperately needs it. It's scheduled to be done by 2021, but it appears it'll probably be 2022. We are working every day to keep the pressure on the I-4 Ultimate contractors. We are opposing any additional funds beyond what we've already slated, regardless of any increase in cost. That was the deal, to make it a public-private partnership. And we've launched investigations into folks who have passed away in those construction projects. So a big $2.5 billion project certainly is going to have some problems to it, but we are proud that our region is getting a project that few regions are getting to help finally help with the traffic. And we're now working on Beyond I-4 Ultimate, which would expand I-4 from the Beyond I-4 project from 535 all the way down to 27, spanning parts of South Orange, Osceola, and Polk counties. So for many of you who are wondering whether that expansion is going to continue down through the rest of the district, the answer is yes, it's going to. And we're stopping at 27 because that's where a lot of the tractor trailers go off the exit. The reason I'm bringing this up in our Jobs Town Hall is you can imagine the thousands of jobs right now in construction that are being paid for by these 2 huge federal projects. And we're going to continue with Beyond I-4 Ultimate, and we're going to continue with expanding Sunrail, which we're hoping to expand through to Polk County, and also work with our partners at Virgin Trains, which will eventually connect Miami to Orlando to Tampa and places in between. So all those are going to create more jobs in construction. One of the keys is working, though, with groups around Florida, and I know you had a couple questions about that.
Yeah,
too.
well, you've already started to connect some of the dots. That this is a Jobs Town Hall. We're talking about manufacturing. We also need to look to the people actually working on the jobs in different labor groups. So, just thought you maybe could give some more detail on some of the things you're doing to protect labor in Florida.
Well, we're absolutely allied and working hand in hand with our local unions, particularly with regard to the building trades. When we're talking about these construction projects, with the service trade unions when it comes to tourism, and our farm workers when it comes to agriculture. So some of the things we've been able to do on the federal level, one is to protect pensions. The House passed out the Butch-Lewis Act because there are some pensions that are in danger of going bankrupt because they were multi-employer pensions that had many employers at one time in them, but some of those employers have gone bankrupt and have refused to pay their share of pensions. So this can affect local members of our Teamsters Union, of our United Auto Workers, and yes, we have United Auto Workers in the district because we have a Mopar facility in the district, as well as our United Mine Workers, among other pensions that could be in danger. People shouldn't be working their whole lives only to have the pensions that they're going to rely on in their golden age to be stripped from them. So we're going to use the power of the federal government to refinance these with no interest loans that will ultimately be paid back, but make sure everybody, all these pensioners in our unions get the bargain that they were promised. We're also fighting to stop a tax on union health plans. It's kind of erroneously been called the Cadillac tax because these healthcare plans have been fought for rigorously, and in often cases, people have sacrificed lower wages to get a better health plan. But we just passed a bill to stop that tax from going through. It's also key to support our apprenticeship programs. Do you know that construction is booming so much that we're having to continue to put more money into our apprenticeship programs because they're full? IBW, our electric workers, our bricklayers, our iron workers, our laborers, all these different programs are absolutely filled, but I encourage you to reach out to some of these different groups because it's a great way to learn a new trade and be able to get a job regardless of whether you decide to go to college or not. And these jobs pay $40, $50, $60, $70 $1,000 a year. Some of them pay up to over $100,000 if you're a long-time journeyman. So these are great ways to be able to make a living in Central Florida. And also, going back to the USMCA trade discussions, this is a key part of what we're negotiating right now with USMCA. I believe American workers can compete with any country around the world as long as we have fair trade, as long as we have fair labor agreements in place in both Mexico and Canada that are similar to here in the United States. And frankly, Canada has even better labor agreements than the United States has. But Mexico has had a history of not enforcing their labor laws, and so that's one of the big concerns as we look to bringing in USMCA into a landing, is that we have fair labor standards throughout North America. And of course, on the local level, I know the right side of a picket line and have been standing with many of our unions as they are collectively bargaining with major employers in the area. I work with our major employers, but at the end of the day, I support them only to the extent that they're supporting our local workers, because those are our constituents. Those are you and I. And I know there's a lot of new exciting things going on as well beyond that.
Yeah, and I'd also like to reiterate for some of our young folks out there that we meet with a lot of these groups daily, and there are a lot of jobs that are currently not being filled. So that's also great opportunity for young folks that sometimes are overlooked. So
sure, and Valencia College and Polk State also have a lot of these training programs, and they work closely with our unions as well. So there's a lot of ways that you could train up and get the skills you need to get a better, higher-paying job and pursue the American dream in Central Florida.
Well, that's great. Well, this is, again, to circle back to our main theme, this is a jobs town hall, and I know one of your priorities has been tech and developing future initiatives, but I was wondering if you could kind of delineate for us how you see those things as being connected.
Sure. And first, let me brag on my deputy LEDS director here for a moment. Bill heads up a lot of the tech policy work that we're doing here in Washington. He is a Rollins College grad, so he is a local guy who is up here in Washington helping our home back in Central Florida. So the way I look at diversifying our economy, and this is really the way we're going to get at that main issue, in addition to helping these other sectors, is really boost the high-tech sectors throughout the district. This is how we're going to lift that median wage from $15 an hour on up and bring prosperity, additional prosperity to Central Florida. So there's several tech clusters that many of you may be familiar with, but maybe you may not be. There are 5 big ones worth mentioning right now, and then I'll talk about some of the things we're working on with them. You have Simulation and Training in East Orlando by UCF, where we do most of the training virtual reality programs for the military. You have advanced sensors manufacturing in Osceola, where we develop some of the next generation sensors. You have space and commercial space flight and aerospace in East Orange County and Brevard County. And you'd be surprised how many people take that trip out to the Cape every day from Florida's 9th Congressional District. There's healthcare and medical technology through Lake Nona. And then there's cybersecurity and data storage over in Winter Haven, Florida, that many people aren't as familiar with. They have the cloud out in Winter Haven, Florida. So just go through some of the big things we're working on. First, with regard to simulation and training, there are tens of thousands of jobs that most people aren't familiar with right around UCF related to creating what are, frankly, the most advanced video games on the planet to train our troops. Everything from flying a fighter plane to a helicopter to a tank to even robots that simulate medic training. And what we're doing is working with our colleagues Stephanie Murphy and Val Demings to make sure that we have both money in the budget and making sure that we're encouraging more U.S. Department of Defense contracts in simulation and training rather than in live training until you get towards the end of the training, because it saves training dollars, it keeps our troops prepared and safe, and it also boosts our local economy. One of the other big clusters that we talked a little bit about is our Advanced Sensors Manufacturing Center in Osceola County, otherwise known as Bridge. And Bridge is situated in an area that we have called Neo City now, which is between Kissimmee and St. Cloud. Well, first, we got big news. You're going to hear it before even it gets out tomorrow morning. That Bridge just got a $20 million Department of Defense contract announced today. So you're hearing it before everybody else is hearing it. Big victory for today. That is the type of work that we've been leading up to. So one of the things we worked on is being a liaison between the Department of Defense and the Bridge Sensors Manufacturing Project to make sure they're doing all the steps they need to be eligible for some of these multi-million-dollar Department of Defense contracts. In addition, we've been working on what we call trusted foundries. There's no secret that as we've been using technology from places like China, they've been putting technology in to spy on Americans and to steal our trade secrets and even spy on our military. Trusted foundries are basically foundries where we're developing technology in America that we can trust to help with our servicemen and women and keeping our country safe. And Bridge is one of those trusted foundries. And we're working on that in a bipartisan fashion with Senator Marco Rubio. The kind of companies that are involved in this: Lockheed Martin, Harris Corp, IMEC, Siemens. A lot of those are the same companies that are working in our simulation and training cluster over in UCF that we just talked about. And we'll continue to help work on delivering these types of issues in the budget to help out Bridge and our high-tech economy. In addition, we talked a little bit about the cybersecurity and data storage cluster we have in Winter Haven. So Winter Haven is one of the few cities that sits right on the fiber optic cable that Bell South built back in the day that goes through the state of Florida. So they have the fastest internet on the planet. They just have to get better access to it. And in one of those old Bell South buildings, they have direct contact. So they have cybersecurity firms there, and they have data storage. So the cloud, you hear it here, is in Winter Haven, Florida. And one of the things we've worked specifically with that tech cluster is to work with Florida that when we dig underground for new roads, that we're getting new connections to this fiber optic cable. We've successfully done that on several occasions and are working on building a smart city in Winter Haven, Florida to really capitalize on the work there. Another big issue is space, and I really think this is going to be the biggest of them all, because we have the busiest spaceport in the world at Cape Canaveral, and we have aerospace and space throughout East Orange County. Lockheed Martin, Harris Corp, Boeing, Northrop Grumman, Siemens, of course NASA and SpaceX, ULA, Blue Origin. And what we're doing is making sure that we're fully funding our military and space flight programs. There are tens of thousands of engineers working in this area. Our 528 warriors going out to the Cape and those working in corporate parks around East Orlando. So the key is to make sure, if you're looking at this and you're hearing us today and you're a young person, if you want to be assured to be in forward-thinking industries, aerospace, some of these computer programming, high-tech STEM careers, we are paving the road for you. The only catch is it's hard. These are hard majors. So, but we know you have the ability to do it if you work hard, and that's where Valencia, Polk State, UCF, and Florida Polytechnic will come in. They have pipelines that are specifically designed with curriculum for you to meet these different areas. And of course, last but not least, we have our medical city at Lake Nona, one of the fastest growing areas of the district. We have the VA hospital, where we have our district office from Orange County. We have the UCF Medical School, which I got to vote on when I was in the state legislature. We have Nemours, UF Pharmacy, Sanford Burnham Institute, which is now going to be run by UCF, and a new HCA teaching hospital as well. One of the things that we're able to do to work with our local researchers there is we passed the SMASH Act earlier this year out of the Congress, which provided funding for CDC research for Zika and other vector-borne, mosquito-borne diseases. Work being done at UF and at UCF right in Lake Nona. We're also working with Nemours because they developed best practices for infant health and for teaching new moms through health centers across the nation on how to help best raise our infants. So just two of the great things going on. But overall, we have our steady eddy areas of tourism and agriculture, and construction ebbs and flows, and the wave of the future is in our tech area. With that, I know we have some questions online, and we're happy to answer them, and we appreciate everybody joining us today.
So you mentioned NeoCity in just now, and kind of give some of your thoughts on how you see the significance of the county and the university partnering up to spend taxpayer dollars in NeoCity, and should funding instead go towards fixing traffic problems?
So I don't think it's an either or. I certainly support Osceola County along with UCF, along with state and federal partners, funding to help NeoCity be a reality. Wages are far too low in Osceola County, and if we don't do something about it, we will continue to be a low-wage economy, and your kids will have a low-wage economy, and their kids will have a low-wage economy. I can't let that happen to our region. I want to make sure that kids who work hard in our area, who get the right skills, are going to be able to have a job that pays them $60,000, $80,000, $100,000. Without an economy that has higher paying jobs, we'll never have the tax revenue to fund some of these other issues. Certainly, I support fixing the traffic issues, and we're working on Beyond I-4 Ultimate. We also have a great announcement to make that many of you may know about already. We convinced the Central Florida Expressway Authority to already start working on expanding the Poinciana Parkway. A lot of you may know that I encourage folks to support the penny for to have to be used to fix the traffic. The voters have had their say, and I respect that. And I thought it should have been an election so that we could all decide together. And so we will continue to work with Osceola County through federal funds and otherwise to do our best to resolve the traffic issues. But I absolutely believe long term we have to invest in a higher paying wage economy, or else Osceola will continue to have a low wage, low quality of life. And we're proud of the work that we're doing.
Well, great question.
And thank you for that great question.
Again, circling back to something we mentioned on the transportation issue, what are your thoughts on the high-speed rail system that you spoke to earlier?
Thanks for that great question. Many of you may know I've been working closely with Virgin Trains for the last couple of years. It was originally Brightline before that, and it right now is already built between Miami to Fort Lauderdale to Palm Beach, and now they're working on phase 2 to go to Orlando. I worked on several letters with the Virgin Trains to get their tax-exempt bonds approved by the Federal Rail Commission, along with Congressman Diaz-Balart of South Florida. So that was a big bipartisan effort that we were successful in achieving. And of course, those bonds are bought by private citizens, but it's tax exempt so that it makes it easier for them to raise money. And of course, with the help of Richard Branson, a famous billionaire and main entrepreneur behind Virgin Industries, they raised over $2 billion on the private market to help fund this high-speed rail. It's slated to get to Orlando International Airport. And another big victory was I negotiated directly with them to connect it to Sunrail. Some of you may have heard about this on Channel 9 WFTV or on some of the Central Florida Expressway Authority meetings. But in 2014, there was a push to connect Sunrail to the eventual Virgin Trains line. The estimate was $150 million. That estimate mushroomed to $300 million 3 or 4 years later. And so I knew this wasn't going to happen because we tried to get the money on the federal level and our Florida Department of Transportation just wasn't ready. So we knew we had to work with the private sector, and we got Virgin Trains to agree, since it's going to help their ridership anyway. They are planning to make the connection from the airport to the Meadowood stop on Sunrail. But that's not all. They're going to be going to Celebration next in our district. They're going to be going to Lakeland next and out to Tampa finally. And that's where getting the Polk Sunrail extension comes in. Sunrail right now stops at Point Siena, but that rail line still goes through Davenport. It goes through Haines City, through Lake Alfred and Auburndale before ending in Lakeland, which, remember, I just mentioned is getting a Virgin train stop. So as we have 1,500 people moving to Central Florida each week, as we have 20% growth, we can't build enough lanes on I-4 for that. So we're looking at multiple ways to fix traffic in Central Florida. And one of those keys is high-speed rail connecting with Sunrail. And so we're going to do everything we can to make sure Polk gets stops on Sunrail. And obviously we'll continue to work with Virgin Trains. But one day soon, you'll be able to go on a Sunrail station throughout Central Florida and get to places as far off as Tampa and Miami without the need of a car. And when I think about the mobility for our seniors, for persons with disabilities, for our young people, don't take for granted the fact that a lot of people don't have cars. And in Central Florida, it's a very isolating feeling. And I'll know we made it when we have that kind of mobility. And we're going to keep working until we get there. Next question.
Thank you for that. And one of the major things, everyone's interested in protecting their current job, but a big
Sure.
issue with our young people and the great universities we have in the area are the future jobs. So I was wondering if you could expand on some of the industries that you expect to have some job growth in the district.
Sure. Most of them are in the STEM-related fields, which is why we stress so much of that at the end. If I were advising, and I did over the last couple weeks, we had town halls at Polk State and at Valencia, and I was at the top 10 breakfasts at several high schools in the district speaking to young people, and I encourage as many of them as possible who like sciences to go into STEM fields, because whether you're going into medicine at Lake Nona, whether you're going into engineering at the aerospace clusters and commercial space and NASA, whether you're going into simulation and training through computer programming, whether you're going to study networks and internet in Winter Haven for cybersecurity and for data storage, or whether you're developing advanced sensors in Osceola County, these are the jobs of the present and of the future. And that's where the most job growth for higher paying jobs are. Now, we could, of course, expect additional job growth in the tourism sector as well. Those are lower paying jobs, so we want to make sure to give people options if they can educate themselves. And then there's also I expect growth in the professional sector as we grow these tech sectors in the area. Because communities that make stuff are the communities that have the best economies. So as we're making content at Disney, as we're making simulation programs for our military, as we're making rockets to go to the moon and Mars and beyond, as we're making high-tech sensors manufacturing, these folks are going to need a doctor. They're going to need a lawyer. They're going to need an accountant. They're going to go to that local pizza place or that local bodega or lechoneta. They're going to go to the local barber shop, or they're going to enroll their kids in the local dance studio. So they're going to need professionals. It's going to drive small businesses as well. But if we don't have tens of thousands of people making $50,000, $80,000, $90,000, $100,000 on median income, and right now our median income is $55,000 a year, if we don't have that, then it's not going to support all the rest of the economy. So that's why I stress I want Central Florida to continue to strive to be the tech capital of the Southeast, so that we can have growth for years to come and support our small businesses, support our professionals and service folks. And so I really think that that is the key, and that's why we're putting so much focus on it. So thanks for that great question.
Indeed. Central Florida is blessed to be a very diverse region. So I was wondering if you could elaborate on how our immigrant community benefits and stimulates the job market.
Well, Florida has over 80,000 immigrants living in Central Florida that have some sort of uncertainty to their immigration status. There's 80,000 Dreamers. There's 800,000 immigrants in Florida, many of whom are working in our tourism, in our agriculture industries. It's time for the law to catch up with the reality that these are folks who are integral to our economy. And if we told them all tomorrow they had to be deported, it would absolutely be devastating and have repercussions throughout every sector of our economy, and it would result in loss of more jobs. So that's why comprehensive immigration reform is key. But we're also looking at different reforms that are more piecemeal to see if we can get them through. The House, in one of the most proudest moments since I've been here, passed the Dream and Promise Act, the DREAM Act, to help out young people. We mentioned 80,000 of them in the state of Florida who know their country other than the United States, who are ambitious, who have to go to college or to the military or to work at a long-term job in order to qualify. It also would give a pathway to citizenship for our TPS communities, those under temporary protective status. Some folks in our Central American community and in our Haitian community have been there 10, 15, 20 years. It doesn't benefit Florida to have them go back now. We should give them a pathway to citizenship because they're already Floridians in every state of the word other than law. We're also working on modernizing the Ag Guest Worker Program so that it could be 5 years rather than 2 years, as long as you're not committing any crimes. And everybody will obviously still be kept track of, and it will help our local ag industry. It'll raise wages because people will be less incentivized to work unlawfully and therefore usually for less than the minimum wage under the table. And it'll also help out with raising wages in the construction industry. The more we could legalize our existing workforce, the more we'll raise wages and help out overall in the economy. So thanks for that great question. Oh, and we are helping out our Venezuelan community too. I passed out of the House a bill to give them temporary protective status. We need the Senate to take that up. There are 180,000 Venezuelans in Florida, many in our district, and their country is under the control of a tyrannical dictator who is murdering his constituents. There's hyperinflation of tens of thousands of percent a year, and there's food shortages. So we stand with our brothers and sisters from Venezuela, and we'll fight to help that community here in Central Florida and beyond.
Well, thank you. You beat me to the punch on that follow-up because I know somebody had specifically asked that question.
Sure, we're on it.
So on to the next one. How have improvements in automation and artificial intelligence impacted job growth?
So we are working on that issue. I'm a big believer that technology is going to happen no matter what. We just need to regulate it properly, and we need to double down on it, including artificial intelligence, including cryptocurrency, including a lot of these cutting-edge technologies. America has been the leader in the global economy for decades because we have not shied away from technology. We have embraced it and doubled down on it. But that doesn't mean we can be callous about it. So I have a bill that the AI Jobs Act, which would look at, one, how we can advance research in artificial intelligence, but two, also identify areas that are going to have disruption and help retrain these workers for the 21st century economy. You know, when the internet really started blowing up around the early to mid 90s, we saw a lot of people who, you know, were in their 40s, 50s, 60s, who had worked at a job for years and that job no longer existed. And we need to have compassion for those folks. We need to give them new training opportunities. It's not easy to go into a new job when you are halfway through your work career. So we support increasing and have increased artificial intelligence research, and we're using that in various ways, including with blockchain technology to help out with food safety, with trying to resolve issues like climate change and healthcare. But we also recognize that we need to help out our workers who may be displaced for that. So thanks for that wonderful question.
And on that issue, the New Democrat Coalition, a body of over 100 members, endorsed that bill. So hopefully we can get more on that to come.
And Bill helped me write it, so good for him too.
Shameless plug, but thank you. So there is environment and energy is another big point of emphasis in your
Sure.
portfolio. Just kind of see if you could go into more detail on how there might be job growth in the renewable energy sector.
Sure. Well, I was really remiss not to mention at the beginning of this town hall that I get to serve on the Energy and Commerce Committee. That is the premier jobs committee in the Congress. We regulate every Fortune 500 company in America. A lot of these tech bills that we're talking about go through there. A lot of the bills related to the internet go through there. Bills related to healthcare go through there. And of course, bills related to environment and energy. So a lot of the bills that we're talking about, I'm on the committee to help do that. And I fought to get on it. It's one of the 3 exclusive committees in the Congress, and it has the broadest jurisdiction of any committee because jobs is the biggest issue in the district, higher paying jobs. And so renewable is a perfect area. You know, we continue to push to make Florida a solar capital. We believe as the Sunshine State, even though we got plenty of rainy days, that there's a lot of potential to continue solar, not just on the major level with utilities and with new solar companies coming into Florida, but also on every rooftop of every house and of every business so that we can generate our own energy as well. And so we support, one, continuing the solar and wind tax credits, so that we can continue to encourage people to invest in renewable energy in their homes, but also the PACE program on the local level that provides low or no interest loans for solar. We worked to pass a good solar amendment that eliminated taxes on the solar equipment, stopped a bad amendment which would have made it hard to have solar in Florida, and now we're working on really encouraging more domestic production. The Trump administration just slapped tariffs on solar coming out of China. It has increased the amount of solar panels quite precipitously. But there is an opportunity in this, which is we need to improve domestic production of solar, and I'm hoping that'll be done in Florida. I also think that that biofuels have a great role to play. Florida has a 24/7 growing season, so we have an ability to grow crops to help develop more biofuels that'll be cleaner. So those are all jobs that could be created and maintained right here in the Central Florida area, and so we're going to continue those efforts on the federal level to boost renewable energy sector jobs, and we're fighting overall to get to carbon neutral by 2050. These historic hearings are happening right now so that we could combat human-caused climate change. I met with the Union of Concerned Scientists the other day and Environment Florida, and they mentioned that we could go from having 3 extreme hot days a year to, by the end of the century, 141. That's days that feel like 105 degrees now if we don't bend the curve on carbon emissions and keep global temperature rise to lower than 2 degrees Celsius. So that's part of that puzzle, and that is the biggest existential threat to the human race, and one that could make Central Florida too hot to live in. So it's something that I take very seriously. And I know we have a couple more questions.
Yep, and on a related note to the environment and clean energy is the issue of recycling.
Sure.
I was wondering if you could go into some of the issues you're considering and how those might impact future jobs.
Sure. So one of the issues we're grappling with right now is that China has stopped collecting a lot of our recycling. So we continue to sell to places like India and to Eastern Europe and other areas, but that market was definitely hurt by China reducing its use of our recycling. One of the things that we want to work on is increasing more recycling plants in in the area. Much of our recycling goes down to South Florida to be processed, which is great, but we certainly want some of those jobs in Central Florida. So that's one of the biggest issues. And we're also encouraging local governments to continue to step up while the state isn't doing as much with regard to everything from plastic straws to styrofoam to things of that nature. We can reduce our consumption of these things, and it would help out a lot to with our landfills and the like. So I think getting more recycling plants in Central Florida would be a big way to help. And then we're having trouble with the plastic secondary market. Glass is doing pretty well. Metals are doing pretty well. Cardboard's doing okay, but the plastic secondary market is something that I'm open-minded to incentives to help with, and that's something that we're working on in the committee.
And I think most folks in Central Florida are broadly aware of the impact of Disney and that they're one of the largest employers. But could you go into who some of the other large employers are in the district?
Sure. So Disney is the largest single-site employer in the United States, with 60,000 people checking in each morning. Largest non-governmental. Some of the biggest employers in the district, we mentioned them already. A lot of our hospitals, like Advent Health and Orlando Health, Lockheed Martin is a huge employer in the district. We have Harris Corp and Siemens are big employers in the district. But there's also a lot of mid-sized companies. You know, a lot of the mid-sized companies are the ones driving the efforts for simulation and training. It's a lot of companies that are founded and headquartered right here in the UCF area of Central Florida. Another big set of employers are construction supplies. Hughes Supply used to be a Fortune 500 company headquartered in Orlando. It got bought out by Home Depot, but most of their operations are still in Orlando. So a lot of construction supplies are developed right in Central Florida, including cement. So a lot of the cement manufacturers are big employers. We talked about cattle and citrus being big employers. You know, those are a lot smaller ranches, but when you look at it all together, it's a huge industry. So those are some of the big employers in the district as well that certainly have a lot of folks working for them. But it's probably easier to look at our economy in terms of clusters, because whether it's 100 smaller companies that make up a big impact or 2 or 3 big companies, we're still driving a lot of job growth through a lot of these tech clusters. So that's one of the reasons why we're focusing a lot on that. And then at the coast, we have the space race going on as we see right now between the commercial space race between Blue Origin, SpaceX, and ULA that we're one of the prime beneficiaries of, because they're all investing in Central Florida. So those are some of the big employers in the area.
And again, I'd just like to, this is a jobs town hall, but I was wondering if you might be open to a question or two unrelated.
Sure.
I know we're getting a lot of comments on the impeachment
Sure.
Broadly, so I was wondering if you could kind of speak to what's going on within the party and more broadly.
Sure. So one, I've mentioned for a while now that I support the impeachment inquiry. I remain open-minded on the question of impeachment. I think we have to finish the process before anybody should be getting to any judgment. The president is accused of 3 counts. 1, treason. He allegedly asked a foreign nation to help out with his re-election and intervene in our 2020 elections to investigate one of his primary rivals, former Vice President Joe Biden, and the Democratic Party. So treason's one of them. Second is bribery. There is allegations that he withheld $391 million from Ukraine to force them to investigate Vice President Biden and the Democratic Party. And 3, obstruction of justice. President Trump and his administration have not complied with many of the subpoenas that we've sent out, and many of the witnesses have not testified. So that's the case against President Donald Trump, and now you see we are in the deposition phase. A lot of people have questions about why the depositions are in closed door. That was a rule that dates back to Republican Speaker John Boehner, who changed the rules in 2015. There are Republicans and Democrats in the room. If you are on the Foreign Affairs, the Intelligence Committee, or on the Oversight Committee, you are one of the members who are allowed in the room. There are about 47 Republicans and 50 plus Democrats. So there are a lot of Democrats, there are a lot of Republicans who have access to those rooms to be there for the depositions, to ask questions. So when we see a stunt like a bunch of Republicans storming the committee room, that was, by the way, a violation of federal law because they violated a top secret clearance room. Half those folks already had access to the room. So we don't need stunts right now. The reason they're behind closed doors is pretty simple, so that witnesses can't corroborate their story, so we get the truth. In addition, there has been some question about subpoenas. It used to be that both the parties had to agree on subpoenas before they were issued. But the Republicans, both these were reforms for the Benghazi hearings. Remember those against then Secretary of State Hillary Clinton? So they changed the rules under the Republicans to allow for just the chairman to issue subpoenas without the approval of the minority party. That's what's happening right now. And so those changes have been around for a while, and now they're being used in this inquiry as well. There's only a matter of time before these witnesses who are being deposed will also be testifying publicly over the next 2 to 3 weeks. So America will hear from the witnesses. Americans will be able to see deposition testimony. Each member of Congress will be able to see deposition testimony and see the live witnesses. So at the end of the day, the process needs to go through to its end. This is our constitutional duty, given the allegations against the president. And I believe the truth will come out in the end. And I believe that's wrap-up time. I have my communications director remind me we're at the end of our hour. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Higher paying jobs is the biggest issue in the district. You can see it's complex. There's a lot going on. There's a lot that we're working on with folks on both sides of the aisle, with employers, employees, unions, civil rights groups, and all these others throughout the district. But the key is we live in a beautiful place with beautiful weather, low taxes, but we have our challenges in higher paying jobs, in traffic, in affordable housing, some things that we didn't get to touch on today, but we're also working on. And so we're working every day here in Washington to try to address these great areas that need improvement so that we improve the quality of life for all of our constituents in Florida's 9th Congressional District, so that everyone, regardless of their background, regardless of where they came from, regardless of who they are, if you live in Central Florida, you'll have access to better education, better infrastructure, higher paying jobs, and ultimately the American dream so that you can be able to provide for you and your family. So now to represent you, and thank you all for tuning in.